What's up everyone, Alex here. I don't know about any of you, but one of the biggest reasons why I love a good JRPG is its story. It's the thread that leads us from one part of its world to the next, offered as both a reward and continuation of a lengthy hours-long saga, typically culminating in taking down the most powerful demon, or god, in its world. Our collective love of stories prompted me to assemble a list of 10 JRPGs whose stories are beloved by the community. Keep in mind that even though I'll be talking about stories in detail here, I've somehow managed to not spoil anything from the games featured, so feel free to watch this whole video without fear of spoilers. And of course, if there are any incredible JRPG stories that have touched you or changed your lives even, please feel free to post it in the comments below. We want more people to be curious about these games, so they'll want to play it for themselves. I'd like to kick this off with a game that I believe is the perfect distillation of the Persona series' foundational elements. I'm of course talking about Persona 4. The latter Persona titles, from 3 onward, have always had different themes for each game, with an accompanying key color to visually represent it. Persona 4, with its bright yellow hue, represents truth. More specifically, the truth in oneself, which sits at the heart of the dichotomy between the series' personas and shadows. The series' iconic phrase, "I am thou, thou art I," resonates much more for Persona 4's cast of characters, as they not only have to try and solve the gruesome murders happening in the sleepy little town of Inaba, but also battle with the shadows that linger in their hearts. This powerful metaphor, fully realized, allows its main cast to grow beyond the confines of their personas, which dovetails beautifully into their social link unlocks, allowing you to form even stronger bonds with them. But this doesn't even touch the fact that Persona 4 is extremely clever with weaponizing your familiarity with every single location and character by setting it in a small provincial town, where it makes sense that everyone knows everyone. And while mechanically, other recent Persona titles have drastically improved the series' gameplay, I'll always look fondly at how its randomly generated dungeons still manage to capture a sense of deliberate design with how each was themed, strongly tied to the shadowy boss that awaited at the end. It might originally be a PS2 game, but Persona 4 has a ton of depth and detail that's easy to miss. And if Atlus ever decides to do a full remake of this game, I'll be there to pick it up on day one. Before 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim blew everyone's collective minds all the way to the stratosphere with its mind-bending storytelling, Vanillaware wasn't particularly known for their writing. They were more of a gameplay-first type studio. That is, except for Odin Sphere. While the striking visuals and fast-paced combat is what will initially lure players in, the game truly got its hooks on you with its stellar cast and interwoven story. The overarching narrative is seen from the perspective of 5 playable characters, and as you complete each of their campaigns, the entire tapestry of the narrative comes together, not just because you see certain events from alternate points of view, but because you're also viewing different portions of the overall timeline and getting a better understanding of why events unfolded the way they did. That's just the tip of the iceberg, of course, as Odin Sphere is full of interesting story threads that are tied together in fascinating ways. When Odin Sphere was remade as Leifthrazir, several aspects of the game were tweaked and improved to create a smoother, more engaging gameplay experience. I think it speaks volumes, however, that the story remained unchanged. They knew they had struck gold with its narrative, and to mess with it would only tarnish the game's legacy. That's how you know that Odin Sphere's story is something truly special and worth experiencing. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 asks a philosophical question mere minutes from its opening sequence. What would you do if you had 10 years to live? This singular query sets the stage for an incredible science fiction adventure where teenagers are pit against each other in a maniacal chess game with no end in sight. Xenoblade Chronicles 3's characters are but mere pawns in a larger machination that they never could have imagined. But what's so great about this game's story is how its lore and narrative ties in with a larger overarching narrative of the series. There have been other series that have lengthy connected narratives that many say need to be played in a very specific order. But the Xenoblade Chronicles series ensures that no matter which game you choose to play, you'll get a confined, well-told story that is satisfying to experience from beginning to end, while leaving the table for you to explore its connections further if you wish. This ensures that no matter your prior relationship with the series, that Xenoblade Chronicles 3's reveals will remain as impactful to newcomers as it does for series veterans, creating a collective experience that will make you want to talk to someone who's already played through the game. It also helps that each of the main cast's plight is relatable despite their young age, as they're forced to grow up quickly due to their shortened lifespan. And as strange as it may sound, I do believe that Xenoblade Chronicles 3's thematics and narrative are the perfect introduction to the series, as it will make you curious just how this game connects to the larger Xenoblade universe as a whole, because once you play one of them, you'll probably want to experience them all. It's not often that a spin-off receives the level of acclaim and admiration that Final Fantasy Tactics gets, but it's clearly for a good reason. Because when Final Fantasy Tactics released back in 1997, many weren't prepared for a tactical RPG to excel in all the ways that truly mattered. This was an era when gameplay was held up high as the only thing that mattered. But it was through games like Final Fantasy Tactics that proved the validity of video games as a storytelling medium. The level of complexity in its narrative was uncommon with games at the time, and made it stand out amongst its contemporaries. But more than that, it helped raise the standards for storytelling higher. This was a game that didn't talk down to its audience, confidently telling its tale without feeling like it needed to hold your hand. So if you're not paying close attention to the intertwined fates of Ramza and Delita, it'll probably be difficult to follow at times, which is partly due to how their destinies connect with the story's larger political machinations, backstabbing, scheming, and changing alliances. All that said, this depth in storytelling is actually a huge part of its appeal, as the game wants you to engage with it and come to your own conclusions about the characters and their place in the world. It's almost crazy to think that this game is nearly 3 decades old, yet its narrative still feels so fresh and interesting after all these years. If you've somehow never given Final Fantasy Tactics a chance, maybe because you assumed that its status as a spin-off meant it was of lower quality, you're absolutely missing out on what is not only one of the best games to bear the Final Fantasy name, but also one of the best stories in the genre, period. Triangle Strategy felt as if it was made by a team that earnestly loves and respects the tactical RPG genre, and wanted to do right by it with a title that exemplified all of its greatest qualities. And yet, despite the constant criticisms from people who care more about the gameplay than storytelling, there can be no denying that one aspect that's gotten consistent praise is its excellent story. Part of what makes it so great is how much freedom you're given in how the story plays out. While this naturally gives the title tons of replay value, it also reveals just how much thought was put into the story and helps you appreciate how intricately put together it is. Not only does it make you feel as if your choices truly matter and have a tangible effect on your playthrough, but it helps make the world feel alive. However, choices on their own aren't enough, as you'll need a good narrative to give the decision-making a sense of weight and purpose that, when ignored, is absolutely missing a portion of what makes it all work. And given that your land is situated at the center of 3 kingdoms, you and your house are quite literally at the heart of where most conflicts occur. This is part of what makes the decision-making have so much weight, because favoring one country often means neglecting or going against another, making you feel the immediate impact of what you ultimately chose. What's crazy about all of this is that unlike other political stories, the narrative never feels overwhelming, as the game does a great job of presenting its story in a way that feels like it all makes sense. If you love tactical RPGs with great storytelling, and especially games with meaningful decision-making, you'll be doing yourself a disservice by not giving Triangle Strategy a fair shake. I have fond memories of Garreg Monastery, and I'll always remember the times I've spent with Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude. So when the game is finally ready to unleash the gruesome war that erupts some years later in Fire Emblem Three Houses, these friendships immediately turn into heartbreak. Fire Emblem Three Houses will force you to choose an allegiance between one of these three leaders' houses, revealing both the purity and the darkness that hides within each house and without. There is simply no choice in Three Houses that results in a truly happy ending where everyone survives and leaves the battlefield unscathed, especially with the series' signature permadeath left on. This is one of those titles that uses its gameplay to have you empathize with an incredibly large cast of characters, each with their own stories, only to have them ally with you, or worse, stab you in the back. But perhaps one of my favorite parts of its narrative is how it portrays your foes as honorable yet flawed characters, whose virtues propel their motivations to either help or hinder the things that they hold dear. And what's even crazier is that there are 3, technically more, JRPGs worth of playthroughs here, as every single house has their own campaign and unique perspective on what's happening. Fire Emblem Three Houses is that once-in-a-generation game that's going to be extremely difficult to top, setting the bar ridiculously high for future games in the series. Much has been said about the Tales of series aesthetics, especially from those who dismiss its anime style as being too cutesy and lighthearted. But while they can be all of those things, Tales of Berseria, in particular, leans harder into its darker storyline. While this alone makes the game stand out amongst the series, its execution is what makes it a fan favorite. If all it had to offer were its brooding protagonist focusing solely on her revenge plot, I don't think the game would be looked back upon as fondly as it is. Velvet's tale of revenge is only a small fraction of what's going on, merely being used as a vehicle in order to effectively comment on several more important topics and themes, and does so with sharp writing and power in its messaging. These lofty ideas are woven together masterfully through its expertly crafted narrative, one that involves so much more than your run-of-the-mill revenge story. Along with Velvet, you're also accompanied by a varied cast of interesting characters, most of which are adults, which keeps things tonally consistent with the game's more serious vibes. This means that not only is each party member richly detailed in their characterization, but they also feel appropriately intelligent and make meaningful contributions to conversations. You'll rarely hear a dumb question or a silly statement for the sake of a gag. All of this together, and so much more, is what makes Tales of Berseria's story so memorable and resonant to this day. When NieR Automata dropped in 2017, it made a huge splash in an already stacked year. Yet NieR Automata still managed to stand out. In fact, every facet of this game is still being analyzed and dissected to this very day. Not only are fans exploring the lore and figuring out how all of Yoko Taro's games are somehow connected to each other, but they're also finding new ways of looking at it and appreciating the messages being conveyed through its story and characters. What makes NieR Automata so effective is that whether you want to take the time to really dig deep into it, or take the story at face value, there's just so many details to take in. And if you're really invested in its narrative, you can read all of the text documents, find the secrets, and learn the lore. You can also think about it from a philosophical perspective, analyzing its themes of existentialism and nihilism thanks to its many explicit references. All of this is great and can add to a person's enjoyment. But at the end of the day, it's also just a cool story with great twists and unique characters. To say that one fully understands NieR Automata is to say that you understand everything that's to know about our world. And anyone who has either chosen or is about to choose to jump into Yoko Taro's wonderfully delightful rabbit hole will find themselves a bit changed, in the best ways possible. Talking about Yakuza Like a Dragon in this part of the video is only fitting, given that the previous titles took you to some truly otherworldly places, whether it's out of this world or out of our minds. And while Yakuza Like a Dragon's Ichiban Kasuga is never short of whimsy, thanks in part to his fandom of the Dragon Quest series, his narrative arc is, comparatively, very human. In this game, Ichiban is in search of a place where he feels like he belongs, which helps build his character up as fiercely loyal, if not occasionally bumbling. He stands in stark contrast to the series' previous singular badass protagonist, Kazuma Kiryu, as he gains his strength through the power of friendship. But this trope is used to the greatest extent in both its gameplay and storytelling, adding a lot of depth to Ichiban's character that only helps endear you to him. And because this is filled with the series' signature Asian melodrama, its revelations, along with the backstabbing, its Yakuza thematics, and a narrative that also serves as a commentary to where the series as a whole is headed, and this seemingly down-to-earth story is, surprisingly, also filled with lots of hidden depth. Surprise! Yakuza Like a Dragon is high up there with me, alongside Yakuza 0 as one of the best-written Yakuza games of all time, which also serves as a fantastic gateway into the series if you're a fan of turn-based RPGs. Much like Triangle Strategy, it's easy to dismiss 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim due to its gameplay. It's just a tower defense game, as many derogatively called it prior to its release. But when the game finally arrived in people's hands, it started this collective thought that everyone who played through it should have the ability to delete that portion of their memory to experience its story for the first time all over again. The premise of 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is pretty basic. Massive kaiju are arriving on Earth to destroy it, and it's up to the 13 Sentinels pilots to defeat them. Simple, right? That is, until you factor several more science fiction tropes on top of that. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim story is Vanillaware doubling down on what made Odin Sphere's multi-perspective narrative beloved by introducing 13 different characters, each with their own unique perspectives, and tying that in with a science fiction story that simply has to be experienced to be enjoyed. And this is probably the only time we're going to experience this level of storytelling from Vanillaware, as it's well chronicled that its director and writer spent countless sleepless nights filled with despair just to craft the narrative into what it is today. The result is an incredibly intricate, multi-layered story that is still, remarkably, very easy to comprehend and follow. And that's not even talking about how you get to choose which character stories you want to see and when you want to engage with its gameplay or not. Even simply looking up the things that inspired it is a spoiler. So do yourself a favor. If you've never played 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim before, go pick it up. I promise that it's going to be one hell of a ride. There are countless other JRPGs with incredible stories that I could have chosen to be part of this list. So I'm going to put you to task and see if you can come up with your own list and share why, spoiler-free, in the comments below. Tell me your favorite JRPGs with your favorite stories, and let's all talk about them. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.